The moment Lyra Everett stepped through the iron gates of the Dravon estate, every vampire in the courtyard stopped moving and stared at her, as though she'd just risen from a coffin herself. She'd only come to drop off catering supplies for the evening's event, a routine delivery from the restaurant where she worked as a manager. The estate had ordered enough champagne flutes and silver serving trays to stock a small hotel, and her boss had insisted she personally oversee the delivery to their most prestigious client. Lyra had agreed, thinking it would be simple. She hadn't expected the gates to swing open before she even pressed the intercom. She hadn't expected the marble courtyard filled with pale, ethereal figures dressed in clothes that looked like they cost more than her yearly salary. And she certainly hadn't expected them all to drop into deep, reverent bows the moment she stepped out of the delivery van. "My lady," someone whispered, and the words rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. Lyra froze, her hand still on the van door. "I think there's been a mistake. I'm just here with the catering order." But none of them rose. If anything, they bowed deeper, their white hair catching the dying sunlight in ways that made them look like living sculptures. She noticed then how similar they all looked, not in features, but in essence. Porcelain skin, elegant bone structure, movements that were too fluid to be entirely human. The realization hit her with the force of a freight train. Vampires. These were actually vampires. She'd heard the rumors, of course. Everyone in the city had. Whispers that the old families weren't just rich and reclusive, they were something other, something ancient. But Lyra had always filed those stories away with urban legends and conspiracy theories. Now, standing in a courtyard full of beings who looked like they'd stepped out of a Renaissance painting, she felt her rational worldview crumbling. "Please," she said, louder this time. "I'm not whoever you think I am. I'm Lyra Everett. I work at Celestine's restaurant. You ordered supplies for tonight?" A woman with hair like spun silver finally rose, though she kept her eyes lowered. "Forgive us, my lady. We did not expect your arrival so soon. The sovereign is inside. He will be overjoyed to see you." "The sovereign?" Lyra's stomach twisted. "Listen, really, there's been a mistake." Before she could protest further, the massive doors of the estate swung open. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The man who emerged moved like darkness given form. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with the same pale skin and white hair that marked all the others. But where they were beautiful, he was devastating. His features were sharp enough to cut glass, all high cheekbones and a strong jaw. His eyes were the color of fresh blood, and they fixed on Lyra with an intensity that made her feel like the rest of the world had simply ceased to exist. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than her car, tailored so perfectly it might have been painted on. Everything about him screamed power, from the way he held himself to the way every other vampire in the courtyard seemed to shrink in his presence. "Lucien," the silver-haired woman breathed. "She's here, the lady from the prophecy. The man Lucien." Descended the steps with measured grace. He didn't take his eyes off Lyra. When he reached her, he was close enough that she could see flecks of darker crimson in his red irises, could smell something like night-blooming jasmine and old books. "My lord," Lyra started, defaulting to what seemed appropriate given everyone else's behavior. "I think your people are confused. I'm just the delivery person." Something flickered in his expression. Not disappointment, exactly. Something more complicated. He studied her face like he was memorizing every detail, and Lyra felt heat rise to her cheeks under such scrutiny. "I see," he said finally. His voice was deep, with an accent she couldn't quite place. "Old world, definitely European, but layered with something older. And yet you wear her face. Whose face?" "The woman from the prophecy." He tilted his head slightly, still watching her with those unsettling red eyes. 300 years ago. A seer foretold that the vampire king would meet his queen in the modern age. She described a woman with dark hair the color of midnight, eyes like amber, and a spirit that burned bright enough to challenge the sun itself. She said this woman would appear at the gates of the Dravon estate, and that her arrival would herald a new era for our kind. Lyra's mouth went dry. She did have nearly black hair and amber eyes. Her parents had always said she looked like her grandmother, who'd had Spanish ancestry. But that didn't make her some prophesied queen. That's just a coincidence. I'm sure lots of people match that description. Perhaps. Lucien's gaze didn't waver. But they did not appear at my gates today, precisely at sunset on the autumn equinox, exactly as foretold. She glanced at her phone. October 22nd. She hadn't even thought about the date. "Look, I understand this is important to you, but I need to unload these supplies and get back to work. My boss will kill me if I'm late." She thinks she must leave. Someone in the crowd murmured. "She doesn't understand yet," another voice added. Lucien raised one hand and every vampire fell silent. The gesture was so casual, yet so absolutely commanding, that Lyra felt her pulse quicken. This was a man, a creature, who expected obedience the way most people expected air. "We will help you with your delivery," Lucien said, "and then we will talk. I really don't think I insist." His tone brooked no argument, but something in his eyes softened. "Please, allow me at least the courtesy of a conversation before you dismiss 3 centuries of hope." The way he said it, with such careful control over what she suspected was profound feeling, made Lyra hesitate. She should leave, should get in her van and drive straight back to the restaurant and pretend this never happened. But something in her, some reckless part she usually kept locked away, wanted to know more. Wanted to understand why this impossibly beautiful, clearly powerful being looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking for lifetimes. "Okay," she heard herself say. One conversation. The smile that touched Lucien's lips was small, but it transformed his entire face. For a moment, he looked less like an ancient predator and more like a man who'd just received unexpected good news. "Excellent." He gestured, and a dozen vampires immediately moved toward the delivery van with supernatural speed. Lyra watched them unload in 30 seconds what would have taken her an hour. "Come, we'll speak in my study." He offered his arm like a gentleman from another century. After a moment's hesitation, Lyra took it. His skin was cool through the fabric of his sleeve, and she felt the solid muscle beneath. As he led her into the estate, she was acutely aware of every eye following them, every whispered conversation that stopped as they passed. The inside of the Dravon estate was even more impressive than the exterior. Soaring ceilings with intricate molding, walls lined with oil paintings that looked genuinely old, and furniture that belonged in a museum. Everything spoke of wealth that had been accumulating for centuries. Lyra, in her practical black work clothes and comfortable shoes, felt completely out of place. Lucien's study was a massive room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a fireplace large enough to stand in, and windows covered in heavy blackout curtains. He guided her to a leather chair near the fire and took the one opposite, maintaining a respectful distance. "Would you like something to drink?" he asked. "Wine? Tea? Something stronger?" "I'm fine, thank you." Lyra gripped the armrest of the chair, using the physical anchor to keep herself grounded. "So, a prophecy, yes!" Lucien leaned back, somehow making the casual posture look regal. "I should explain. The vampire world is not what humans imagine. We are organized, governed by laws and traditions that predate most human civilizations. I am what my kind call the sovereign, the king of the vampire nation. It's a position I've held for nearly 800 years. Lyra's mind struggled to wrap around that number. 800 years. He'd been alive since the Middle Ages. "For most of that time," he continued, "I've ruled alone. Vampires do not often find mates. We are territorial, passionate creatures, and true compatibility is rare. But it is said that when a vampire finds their true mate, the bond is absolute, unbreakable. A melding of souls that transcends even immortality. And you think I'm your mate because of a prophecy. I think you match a prophecy that has given my people hope for 3 centuries, he corrected gently. Whether you are truly my mate, that is something only time would tell. The bond cannot be forced. It is recognized." Lyra met his eyes, those strange red eyes that should have terrified her but instead made her feel oddly safe. "I'm human. I am aware. I work in a restaurant. I have student loans. My car needs new tires. I'm about as far from queen material as it gets. Titles are given, not born." Lucien leaned forward slightly. "But I am not asking you to claim any title. Not yet. My people saw you and made assumptions. Let them keep those assumptions, at least for tonight. Stay for the gathering. Allow them their hope, and allow me the chance to know you, not as a prophesied queen, but as Lyra Everett." There was something in his voice, a loneliness that resonated with something in her own chest. Lyra had spent years working, surviving, pushing through each day without much thought for companionship or romance. Her last relationship had ended badly enough that she'd sworn off dating entirely. But this wasn't dating. This was something else entirely. "Why?" she asked. "Why does it matter so much?" Lucien was quiet for a moment, and she saw him choosing his words carefully, because hope is a rare commodity for immortals. "We live so long that most things lose their meaning. But for 300 years, my people have believed that someday their king would find his queen. That belief has sustained them through wars, through persecution, through the modern age that forces us further into shadow. If I tell them now that you are not her, if I send you away..." He trailed off, and Lyra saw something ancient and tired in his expression. It would break something in them, in me. The honesty of it hit her harder than any amount of supernatural intimidation could have. This was a creature of immense power, asking her for a kindness not because he could take it, but because he needed it. Just for tonight? she asked. Just for tonight, he agreed. Tomorrow, you can return to your life. I will ensure my people understand. But give us this one evening. Lyra thought about her empty apartment, the frozen dinner waiting in her freezer, the Netflix queue that never seemed to get shorter. She thought about the way every vampire in that courtyard had looked at her with such reverence. She thought about Lucien's eyes and the careful hope she saw there. All right, she said. One evening, the relief that washed over his features was so genuine it made her chest ache. He stood, offering his hand to help her up. When she took it, she felt that coolness again, but also a strange warmth beneath it, like a fire banked but not extinguished. Thank you, Lyra Everett, he said softly. You have given my people a precious gift. I haven't done anything yet. You stayed. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gesture so brief she might have imagined it. That is more than enough. He led her out of the study and up a grand staircase. The other vampires they passed continued to bow, continued to murmur, "My lady," and "Your grace." Lyra tried not to let it go to her head. But there was something intoxicating about being treated like royalty, even if it was all based on a misunderstanding. Lucien brought her to a bedroom suite that was larger than her entire apartment. The bed alone could have slept 4 people comfortably, and the attached bathroom had a tub that looked more like a small pool. The gathering begins at full dark, in about 2 hours, he explained. I've taken the liberty of having appropriate attire prepared. If nothing suits your taste, we can find something else. He gestured to the massive walk-in closet. Lyra peered inside and felt her jaw drop. Dozens of dresses hung in neat rows, everything from sleek modern gowns to elaborate historical pieces. Shoes lined the bottom shelves. Jewelry glittered from glass cases. How did you? She started. I may have been overly optimistic about the prophecy, he admitted, and there was something almost sheepish in his tone. These have been waiting for years. Decades. In some cases, Lyra ran her hand along a deep blue velvet gown, feeling the quality of the fabric. This is insane, perhaps. He moved to leave, then paused at the door. Lyra, if at any point this evening becomes too much, if you wish to leave, simply tell me. I will personally ensure your safe passage home. I may ask for your time, but I will never take your freedom. Something in her chest loosened at those words. She nodded. Thank you. When he left, closing the door softly behind him, Lyra sank onto the edge of the enormous bed and tried to process what was happening. She'd delivered catering supplies and somehow ended up playing Cinderella for a court of actual vampires. It was absurd. Impossible. And yet, as she looked at the dresses in the closet, she felt a flutter of excitement she hadn't experienced in years. Just one evening, she told herself. What was the harm? She chose a gown eventually, a deep burgundy silk that complemented her amber eyes and fell in elegant lines to the floor. It fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her measurements. When she looked at herself in the full-length mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked like she belonged in this world of ancient glamour. A soft knock came at the door precisely 2 hours after Lucien had left. When she opened it, she found him waiting, and the look on his face made all her breath leave in a rush. You are breathtaking, he said simply. He'd changed into formal evening wear, a black jacket with subtle crimson embroidery that caught the light when he moved. May I escort you to the gathering? Lyra took his offered arm again, and together they descended the grand staircase. As they reached the bottom, she heard music, the kind of classical instrumental that sounded like it was being played by an actual orchestra, not a sound system. Lucien guided her through tall double doors into a ballroom that took her breath away. The space was enormous, lit by what must have been 1,000 candles in crystal chandeliers. Vampires filled the room, all of them dressed in formal attire, all of them turning to watch as Lucien entered with Lyra on his arm. The music swelled, and someone called out, "The Sovereign and his lady!" The entire room bowed. Lyra's fingers tightened on Lucien's arm. He covered her hand with his free one, a reassuring gesture. "Breathe," he murmured. "You need only stand beside me. I will handle the rest." And he did. As the evening progressed, Lucien introduced her to what seemed like hundreds of vampires. Each one treated her with deep respect, though she could see curiosity in their eyes. They were wondering, she realized, if the prophecy was truly coming to pass, if their king had finally found his queen. The weight of their hope was almost crushing. "You're doing wonderfully," Lucien said at one point, guiding her to a quieter corner of the ballroom. He handed her a glass of champagne. "I know this must be overwhelming. That's one word for it." Lyra took a sip, grateful for something to do with her hands. "They really believe I'm the one from the prophecy." "They want to believe," he corrected. "There is a difference." He looked out at the gathered crowd, and she saw something complicated in his expression. My people have waited so long for this, for me to find happiness. They think it will change things, make our world brighter somehow." "And you?" Lyra asked. "What do you think?" Lucien turned those red eyes back to her, and she felt pinned by their intensity. "I think that prophecies are tricky things. They tell us what to look for, but not always what we will find. I think that you are remarkable, Lyra Everett. Whether or not you are the woman from the prophecy, you are someone who chose kindness when you could have chosen fear. That alone makes you extraordinary." Heat crept up her neck. She wasn't used to such direct praise, especially not from men who looked like fallen angels. "You don't even know me." "Then let me." He set down his own glass and held out his hand. "Dance with me. Let me begin to know who you are." The orchestra had shifted to a waltz, the kind of elegant, sweeping music that belonged in a different century. Lyra hesitated. "I don't really know how to waltz." "I am 800 years old," Lucien said with a hint of amusement. "I have had some practice. Trust me to lead." She placed her hand in his, and he drew her onto the dance floor. His hand settled at her waist, cool even through the silk of her dress, and he began to move. Lyra stumbled at first, but he compensated effortlessly, guiding her through the steps with such confidence that she found herself following instinctively. "See," he said softly, "you need only trust." They swept across the floor, and Lyra became aware of every point where their bodies touched. His hand at her waist, strong and steady, his other hand holding hers, gentle despite the power she knew he possessed. The way he looked at her, like she was the only person in the room, despite the hundreds watching them. "Tell me about yourself," he said as they moved. "Not about work or student loans or tire payments. Tell me what brings you joy." Lyra thought about it. When was the last time someone had asked her that? "I like thunderstorms," she said finally. "The really dramatic ones where the rain is so heavy you can barely see. I like sitting by the window and watching them roll in." "Why?" "Because they're powerful and beautiful and completely beyond anyone's control. They remind me that there are forces in the world bigger than bills and schedules and everyday worries." Something shifted in Lucien's expression. "That is a very vampire perspective." "Is it? We live long enough to see empires rise and fall. We learn to appreciate the eternal forces. Storms, oceans, the turning of stars." He pulled her slightly closer as they turned. "What else?" "Old books. The kind that smell like paper and time. Museums late in the day when they're almost empty. Music that makes my chest feel tight." She met his eyes. "What about you? What brings an 800-year-old vampire king joy?" "Rare things," he said quietly. "Moments of genuine surprise, conversations that challenge me, the few people who see beyond the crown and the fangs and treat me as simply Lucien." His gaze intensified. "This. Now, dancing with a woman brave enough to stay when she could have run. Finding myself curious about what she'll say next." Lyra's heart was beating too fast. She knew he could probably hear it, could probably sense the effect he was having on her. There was something magnetic about him, something that went beyond his otherworldly beauty. He made her feel seen in a way she hadn't experienced in years, maybe ever. The waltz ended, and they stood there in the center of the dance floor, neither moving. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. "My lord," a voice interrupted, "forgive the intrusion." Lucien's expression shuddered, falling back into regal composure. He turned to find a vampire with silver-white hair pulled back in a severe style. The man bowed deeply. "The council requests an audience. Now?" Lucien's tone suggested that he found this timing highly inconvenient. "They say it is urgent, my lord." Lucien looked at Lyra, and she could see the internal debate playing out behind his eyes. Duty versus desire. "I apologize," he said. "I must attend to this. Seraphine will keep you company." He gestured to a female vampire who materialized at his side, the same one who'd spoken to Lyra in the courtyard. "I will return as soon as possible." "It's fine," Lyra assured him, though she felt the loss of his presence like a physical thing. "I'll be okay." He hesitated, then lifted her hand to his lips. The kiss he pressed there was cool and brief, but it sent electricity racing up her arm. "I will hurry," he promised, and then he was gone, moving through the crowd with that supernatural grace. Seraphine smiled at Lyra with genuine warmth. "Come, my lady, let me show you the gardens. They are quite beautiful by moonlight." Lyra let herself be led through French doors onto a terrace. The estate's garden stretched out before them, all manicured hedges and stone pathways lit by lanterns. The moon was nearly full, casting everything in silver light. "You must forgive our enthusiasm earlier," Seraphine said as they walked. "We have hoped for so long, the prophecy," Lyra said. "Can you tell me more about it? Lucien gave me the basics, but you want to understand what you've walked into." Seraphine nodded. "That is wise. The seer who gave the prophecy was one of our most powerful. She saw far into the future, to a time when vampires would live in shadow, forced to hide what we are. She said that in this time, a human woman would come who could bridge our two worlds, that she would be the sovereign's true mate, and together they would lead us into a new age. That's a lot of pressure to put on a relationship that doesn't exist, does it not? Seraphine's knowing look made Lyra shift uncomfortably. I have served Lucien for 300 years. I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you tonight. The prophecy may have brought you here, but something else made you stay. Lyra couldn't argue with that. She had felt something from the moment Lucien stepped out of the estate. A pull, a connection that made no logical sense but felt undeniable nonetheless. What if I'm not who the prophecy describes? Lyra asked. What if I'm just someone who happens to match the physical description? Then Lucien will deal with the disappointment, as he has dealt with 8 centuries of burdens. Seraphine stopped walking and turned to face Lyra fully. But I will tell you something. The prophecy did not just describe your appearance. It described your spirit. It said the sovereign's queen would be a woman who burned bright, who chose compassion over fear, who had the strength to stand beside a king without being diminished by his shadow. You don't know if I'm any of those things. You are here, are you not, when most humans would have fled in terror? Seraphine smiled. You are more than you think, Lyra Everett. Before Lyra could respond, a commotion erupted from inside the ballroom. Raised voices, the sound of something breaking. Seraphine's expression went hard. Stay here, she commanded, and then she was racing back inside with inhuman speed. Lyra, of course, didn't stay. She hurried after Seraphine, her long dress making running difficult. When she reached the ballroom, she found it in chaos. Vampires were scattered around the edges of the room, and in the center stood a group of unfamiliar vampires who looked nothing like Lucien's elegant court. These were rougher, dressed in modern street clothes, and their eyes held open hostility. Lucien stood between them and his people, and even from across the room, Lyra could feel the rage radiating from him. His eyes had gone darker, the red deepening to near black, and shadows seemed to gather around him like living things. You dare enter my domain uninvited, he said, his voice carrying across the ballroom with preternatural clarity. You dare threaten my people. We threaten nothing, Sovereign, one of the intruders said, sneering the title. We merely question, is it true? Have you found your prophesied queen, or is this another ploy to consolidate your power? Lyra realized with a jolt that they were talking about her, that this confrontation was happening because word had spread about her presence. My personal affairs are not your concern, Constantine, Lucien said coldly. They are when you use prophecy to manipulate the vampire nation. Constantine, a tall vampire with scars crossing his pale face, stepped forward. Some of us do not bow to ancient predictions. Some of us question whether a human could ever be worthy of. He stopped mid-sentence, his eyes going wide. Lyra followed his gaze and realized with dawning horror that he was looking at her. She'd moved into the ballroom doorway, clearly visible to everyone. Constantine's expression twisted into something ugly. Her? A common human? This is what our great sovereign offers as queen. The insult in his tone made something snap inside Lyra. She'd spent the evening feeling like an imposter, like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. But hearing the stranger sneer at Lucien, question his judgment, made her forget her own doubts. She walked forward, ignoring Seraphine's hissed warning. The crowd parted for her automatically, and she moved with her head high until she stood beside Lucien. His eyes widened slightly as she arrived, but he didn't tell her to leave. You question the sovereign's judgment? Lyra said, her voice steadier than she felt. That seems unwise. Constantine laughed, a harsh sound. The human speaks. Tell me, girl, what do you know of vampire politics? Of the weight of a crown? Of leading a nation that has existed for thousands of years? Nothing, Lyra admitted. But I know disrespect when I see it. You came here uninvited, disrupted a formal gathering, and insulted your king. Where I come from, that's grounds for being thrown out on your ass. A shocked silence fell over the ballroom. Then, to Lyra's surprise, several of Lucien's court began to laugh. Not mockingly, but with genuine amusement and approval. Constantine's face darkened. You dare! She dares! Lucien interrupted, his voice like ice over steel. And she is correct. You have violated sacred law by entering uninvited and disrupting a formal court gathering. You have insulted me directly. Give me one reason why I should not have you dragged into the sunlight and left for dawn. The threat was delivered so calmly, but every vampire in the room felt the weight of it. Lyra saw Constantine's companions take an involuntary step back. The old ways are ending, Constantine said, but his bravado was cracking. You cannot rule forever, Sovereign. Others grow tired of your control. Then let them challenge me properly, through the channels established by law. Lucien took a step forward, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. but they will not insult me in my own home. They will not question my choices, and they will not threaten what is mine." His eyes flicked to Lyra for a fraction of a second, and she felt heat flood through her despite the supernatural cold. "Is that what she is?" Constantine asked. "Yours? Have you claimed her then? Made her vampire?" "I have claimed nothing that has not been freely offered," Lucien said. "Unlike some, I understand the concept of consent. Now leave, before I forget mercy and remember only justice." For a long moment, Constantine looked like he might argue further. Then survival instinct won out. He bowed, the gesture perfunctory and barely respectful, and gestured to his companions. They retreated from the ballroom, but Constantine paused at the door. "The prophecy speaks of a new age," he said. "But it does not promise that age will be peaceful. Remember that, Sovereign." Then they were gone, and the tension in the room finally broke. Vampires began murmuring among themselves, and Seraphine was issuing orders to increase security. Lucien stood perfectly still for a moment, and then he turned to Lyra. "You should not have done that," he said quietly. "Probably not," she agreed. Her hands were shaking, and adrenaline was making her feel lightheaded. "But he was insulting you. I couldn't just stand there." Something fierce and possessive flashed in Lucien's eyes. Before Lyra could react, he'd taken her hand and was leading her out of the ballroom, down a corridor, into a smaller room that looked like a private library. He shut the door behind them and then just looked at her, his chest rising and falling with unnecessary breaths, a sign of agitation. "You defended me," he said. "Yes, you stood beside me against a vampire who could have killed you with one blow." "I didn't really think about that part," Lyra admitted. Lucien closed the distance between them in a movement too fast to follow. Suddenly he was right there, close enough that she could see the exact shade of red in his eyes, could feel the cool air that surrounded him. His hands came up to frame her face, gentle despite the tension thrumming through his body. "You magnificent, infuriating woman," he breathed. "Do you have any idea what you did? You stood as my queen in everything but name. You challenged a dissenter. You showed my court that you are not some frightened human, but someone with fire and courage. I just said what needed saying." "No." His thumb brushed her cheekbone, and Lyra's eyes fluttered closed at the sensation. "You claimed your place. Whether you meant to or not, you stood beside me as an equal." When she opened her eyes, she found him looking at her with such raw emotion that it stole her breath. Want, yes, but also wonder, disbelief. "Hope." "Lucien," she whispered, not even sure what she was asking for. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she didn't, when she swayed toward him instead, his lips met hers. The kiss was cool fire, gentle but consuming. His lips moved against hers with centuries of skill, and Lyra felt her knees go weak. She gripped his shoulders for support, and he made a low sound in his throat that sent electricity down her spine. His arms came around her, pulling her closer, and she melted into him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes had gone brilliant red. "I should not have done that," he said, though he made no move to release her. "I'm not sorry you did, Lyra." Her name sounded like a prayer in his mouth. "I have lived 800 years. I have seen empires crumble and ages turn. I have been alone for so long that I forgot what it felt like to want something, someone, with this intensity. And then you walk through my gates. And suddenly the world had color again. I'm just a restaurant manager from the city," she said, but her protest sounded weak even to her own ears. "You are the woman who made me remember what hope feels like." He kissed her forehead, then her cheek, feather-light touches that made her ache. "Prophecy or not, I know what I feel. I know what I want. What do you want? You." The word was simple but absolute. "Time with you. Conversations with you. The right to stand between you and anything that would harm you. I want to know everything about you. I want to hear your thoughts on storms and old books. I want to see you smile and know that I caused it." He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "I want you to stay, not because of a prophecy, but because you wish to." Lyra's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might burst. This was insane. She'd known him for a handful of hours, but somehow, impossibly, she felt it too. That pull, that connection. Like something in her recognized something in him. "I have a life," she said, but it came out uncertain. "A job, responsibility, and I would never ask you to abandon them." His hands slid down to take hers. "But I am asking for a chance. Not as a king looking for his prophesied queen. As a man who has found someone extraordinary and does not wish to let her slip away." Before Lyra could answer, a knock came at the door. Lucien's expression darkened with annoyance, but he called, "Enter." Seraphine stepped in, looking apologetic but urgent. "My lord, forgive the interruption." But Constantine and his companions were seen heading toward the human districts. "There is concern they may try to cause trouble, perhaps even take hostages to pressure you." Lucien went absolutely still, but Lyra felt the rage that poured off him like heat. How many went with him? 15 that we know of. Assemble the guard. We go now. He turned to Lyra. You will stay here, behind the wards. You will be safe. What are you going to do? Ensure that Constantine understands the consequences of threatening innocence. The way he said it made it very clear that those consequences would be severe. He started for the door, then paused and turned back. He crossed to her in 3 strides, cupped her face, and kissed her hard. Stay safe. I will return. Then he was gone, moving with that supernatural speed. Seraphine gave Lyra a sympathetic look. He will be well. Lucien is the sovereign for a reason. There are none more powerful. He's going to kill them, Lyra said quietly. If they have harmed humans, yes. That is our most sacred law. We exist in shadow so that humanity may live in light. Those who break that law forfeit their right to immortality. Seraphine moved to the door. Come, I'll take you somewhere more comfortable to wait. But Lyra didn't want to wait in comfort. She wanted to understand this world she'd stumbled into. Tell me more about vampire laws, she said as they walked. If I'm going to be here, even temporarily, I should understand. Seraphine looked pleased by the request. They settled in a smaller sitting room, and the vampire began to explain. The laws were complex, but made sense. Vampires were forbidden from killing humans except in self-defense. They could feed only from willing donors or from blood banks they'd established and carefully regulated. Any vampire who revealed their nature to humans without permission from the sovereign faced severe punishment. We are not monsters, Seraphine explained. Or rather, we choose not to be. Lucien has spent centuries building a society that allows us to coexist with humanity in peace. It has not been easy. There are always those like Constantine who chafe at the restrictions, who remember the old days when vampires took what they wanted. But Lucien stopped that, he did. When he claimed the throne 800 years ago, vampire kind was fracturing. Different factions, different rulers, all warring for territory. Humans were discovering us, hunting us. We were on the edge of extinction. Lucien united the clans through strength and wisdom. He established the laws. He built this world where we could survive and even thrive. Seraphine smiled. He is a good king, but he has been a lonely one. You really think I'm the one from the prophecy? I think you are the woman who made him smile tonight, who made him angry and protective and alive in ways I have not seen in decades. Prophecy or not, that matters. They talked for over an hour, Seraphine patiently answering Lyra's questions about vampire society. She learned about the different courts, the alliances and tensions between regions. She learned that Lucien's territory covered the eastern seaboard of North America, and that he was considered one of the most progressive rulers in the vampire world. She also learned that the prophecy wasn't just about Lucien finding a mate. It spoke of change coming to the vampire world, of a choice between evolution and extinction. The sovereign's queen was supposed to be the catalyst for that change, but what form it would take, no one knew. It frightened some of them, Seraphine admitted. Change always does. That is why Constantine and his followers resist. They fear losing the old ways. The old ways where they could kill whoever they wanted. Precisely. Seraphine's expression hardened. They see Lucien's laws as weakness. They do not understand that adaptation is the truest form of strength. A commotion outside made them both look up. Seraphine rose gracefully. He returns! Lyra followed her out into the main hall. Lucien was there, along with a dozen other vampires. There was blood on his clothes, dark stains against the black fabric. His eyes were still that deep, dangerous red. When he saw Lyra, some of the tension left his shoulders. You're all right, she said, moving toward him before she could think better of it. I am well. He caught her hands, keeping her from getting too close to the blood. Constantine will not trouble anyone again, nor will his followers. You killed them. I executed them according to vampire law. They had killed 3 humans, planning to use the bodies as a message to me. His voice was steady, but she could see the fury still simmering beneath. I do not tolerate such things. Lyra should have been horrified, should have been frightened by this evidence of just how dangerous he was, but instead, she found herself thinking of those 3 innocent people who'd been murdered just to send a message, thinking of how many more might have died if Lucien hadn't acted swiftly. I'm glad you stopped them, she said quietly. Something in his expression softened. You are not afraid. I'm terrified, she admitted, but not of you, of this whole situation, of what I'm feeling. She took a shaky breath. I should go home, get some perspective, think about all of this rationally. Yes, Lucien agreed, though the word clearly cost him. That would be wise, but I don't want to. His eyes widened slightly. Lyra, I don't want to be wise about this, she continued, the words spilling out. I don't want to go home and talk myself out of whatever this is. because I know if I do, if I leave now, I'll convince myself it was all crazy, that I imagined this connection. That it's safer to go back to my ordinary life and forget about prophecies and vampire kings and the way you make me feel like I'm standing at the edge of something profound. How do I make you feel? His voice had gone rough. Like I've been sleepwalking through my life and just woke up, like maybe I'm allowed to want something extraordinary. She stepped closer, ignoring the blood on his clothes, like I could fall in love with you if I let myself. The sound he made was almost wounded. He pulled her against him, heedless of the stains, and buried his face in her hair. You undo me, he murmured, completely and utterly. They stood there, holding each other in a hallway full of watching vampires, and Lyra felt something click into place. This was right. Impossible, maybe. Complicated, definitely. But right. Stay, Lucien said against her hair. Not as the prophesied queen. Not for my people or duty or destiny. Stay because you want to be here. Stay so I can court you properly. So I can show you my world and learn everything about yours. Stay and let me try to win your heart. Lyra pulled back enough to look at him. His eyes had returned to their normal red, and in them she saw vulnerability that probably few people ever witnessed. An immortal king asking a mortal woman for a chance at happiness. I need to call my boss, she said, and feed my cat, and get some clothes. Hope blazed across his features. Is that a yes? That's a let's see where this goes. She reached up to touch his face, marveling at the cool smoothness of his skin. No promises, no prophecies, just you and me figuring this out. Just you and me, he repeated, and sealed the words with a kiss that made the rest of the world disappear. The next few days passed in a blur. Lyra did call her boss, using a family emergency as an excuse for taking time off. She arranged for a neighbor to care for her cat. Lucien sent people to collect whatever she needed from her apartment, always with her specific permission. He was scrupulous about respecting her autonomy. Even as he made it clear he wanted her to stay, he courted her with an old-world intensity that was both overwhelming and intoxicating. Dinners in his private dining room where they talked for hours. Walks through the estate gardens at night, since daylight was impossible for him. He showed her his library, his art collection, pieces of history he'd accumulated over centuries. He listened when she talked about her dreams of maybe opening her own restaurant someday, and he asked questions that showed he was genuinely interested. On the third night, he took her to the vampire court. It was a formal session, held in a great hall beneath the estate that Lyra hadn't known existed. The space was ancient, all stone and Gothic arches, lit by torches that cast dancing shadows. Hundreds of vampires filled the hall, and at the far end, a throne of black stone stood on a raised dais. Lucien led her to a smaller chair beside the throne, placed there deliberately. When the vampires saw her take that seat, the seat of a queen, a murmur ran through the crowd. My people, Lucien said, his voice carrying through the hall with preternatural strength. I present to you Lyra Everett. She is under my protection. She has shown courage and wisdom, and she has chosen of her own free will to remain among us and learn our ways. The vampires bowed, a wave of pale figures showing respect. Lyra felt the weight of their gazes, their expectations. Lucien had been right. They desperately wanted the prophecy to be true. They wanted hope. The court session proceeded with Lucien hearing various petitions and disputes. Lyra watched, fascinated by the glimpse into vampire society. She saw how Lucien ruled with a combination of strength and fairness, how he listened carefully before making decisions, how even those who disagreed with his rulings respected his judgment. She also saw how he glanced at her periodically, checking to make sure she was all right, how his hand would reach for hers during difficult moments, as though drawing strength from her presence. After the session ended, a vampire approached the dais. She was ancient even by vampire standards, her white hair so long it trailed on the floor. Her eyes were milky with age, but Lyra felt the power radiating from her. Oracle Morrigan, Lucien said, rising and bowing. You honor us with your presence, Sovereign. The old vampire's voice was surprisingly strong. I came to see the woman for myself. She turned those milky eyes toward Lyra, and suddenly Lyra understood. This was the seer, the one who'd given the prophecy 300 years ago. Come here, child, Morrigan said. Lyra stood on shaky legs and descended the dais. Up close, the oracle was even more intimidating. She reached out with gnarled hands and took Lyra's face between them, tilting her head this way and that. Yes, she said after a long moment. Yes, I see it now. See what? Lyra asked. The fire, the strength, the thread that binds you to him. Morrigan's smile was knowing. You are not what I expected, but you're exactly what the vision showed. The woman who burns bright, the one who will stand beside the sovereign and light the way forward. I'm just Lyra. No, child, you are the catalyst, the choice. Morrigan released her and turned to Lucien. But know this, Sovereign. The prophecy speaks of a new age, but it does not promise ease. Great change is coming. She will be the key, but the door she unlocks may lead to salvation or destruction. You must be prepared for both. The oracle swept from the hall, leaving shocked silence in her wake. Lyra turned to Lucien and found him staring at her with something like awe. She confirmed it. Someone in the crowd whispered, "The human is the one, the sovereign's queen. The prophecy is fulfilled." The murmurs grew louder, more excited. Lyra felt panic rising in her chest. This was too much, too fast. She'd agreed to stay and see where things went with Lucien, not to fulfill some ancient destiny. "Lucien," she said urgently. He saw the fear in her eyes and immediately took her hand. "We are done here," he announced to the court. "You are dismissed." Despite obvious reluctance, the vampires filed out. When they were finally alone in the great hall, Lyra pulled away from Lucien and wrapped her arms around herself. "This is insane," she said. "I can't be some prophesied savior. I don't know how to lead anyone or light any ways forward or whatever else that oracle said." "No one is asking you to do those things," Lucien said calmly. "Not yet. Not until you are ready." "What if I'm never ready? What if I'm just a normal woman who happened to match a physical description?" She turned to face him. "What if I disappoint them?" "Disappoint you?" Lucien closed the distance between them. "Lyra, look at me." She did, meeting those red eyes that had become so familiar. "I do not want you because of a prophecy," he said firmly. "I want you because you are clever and brave and kind, because you make me laugh, because you challenge me, because when I kiss you, I feel like my long existence finally has purpose." He cupped her face gently. "If the prophecy is true, if you are meant to help lead my people, we will face that together. But if you are simply Lyra Everett, the woman I am falling in love with, that is more than enough." "You're falling in love with me?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper, helplessly. He kissed her softly. "I know it has only been days. I know this is all moving very fast. But I am 800 years old, and I know my own heart. You have claimed it entirely." Lyra felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm falling for you, too. So fast it scares me. Then be scared with me." He pulled her close, wrapping her in his arms. "We will figure this out together. I promise you, whatever comes, I will stand beside you. I will protect you. I will give you whatever time you need. There is no prophecy that dictates how we do this, only that we try." She buried her face in his chest, breathing in his scent of old books and jasmine. "Okay," she said. "Okay, we'll try." Over the next 2 weeks, they found a rhythm. Lyra continued to learn about vampire society, sitting in on court sessions and meetings. Lucien's advisors began to include her in discussions, valuing her outsider perspective. She found that her years managing a restaurant had given her unexpected skills in negotiation and problem-solving that translated well to vampire politics. She also spent time with individual vampires, getting to know Lucien's people. Seraphine became a friend, teaching her about vampire history and culture. She met Dashiell, Lucien's second-in-command, a serious vampire who warmed to her after she helped resolve a territorial dispute through simple common sense. She learned names, faces, stories, and every night she fell more in love with Lucien. He showed her sides of himself that no one else saw. His dry sense of humor, his love of music, particularly the piano pieces he'd learned centuries ago and still played with heartbreaking skill. The way he watched old movies with genuine enjoyment despite having lived through the eras they depicted. His kindness toward his people, even when enforcing difficult laws. They talked about everything. Her childhood, his impossibly long life, her hopes for the future, his fears that he'd never truly be enough for his people. They debated philosophy and argued about which pizza toppings were acceptable. They found joy in the simple act of being together. The physical attraction between them was undeniable, but Lucien never pushed. His kisses set her on fire, but he always pulled back before things went too far. "I want you to be certain," he'd say. "I want you to choose this with full knowledge of what it means." "What does it mean?" she asked one night, curled up beside him on a sofa in his private chambers. "That you will be bound to a vampire king, that your life will never be entirely your own again, that you will face dangers and difficulties that most humans never imagine." His fingers traced patterns on her shoulder. "That you will grow old while I remain unchanged. That someday you will die and I will have to continue without you." The pain in his voice made her chest ache. She sat up to look at him. "Or I could become a vampire." He went very still. "That is a choice I will never ask you to make. What if I want to? Then we will discuss it when you have been in this world long enough to understand what you would be giving up." He pulled her back against him. "Mortality is precious, Lyra. Do not throw it away lightly." She understood what he wasn't saying. That he would love her regardless of her choice. That he would take whatever time they had and treasure it. that even the pain of losing her would be worth the joy of having her at all. It was 3 weeks after she'd first walked through the Dravon estate gates that everything changed. Lyra was in the library, reading about vampire law, when Seraphine burst in with uncharacteristic lack of composure. "My lady, you must come quickly. What's wrong?" "There are humans at the gates. They know about us. They are demanding to speak with the sovereign." Lyra's blood went cold. This was the nightmare scenario Lucien had described. Humans discovering the truth about vampires, the carefully maintained secrecy breaking down. She ran after Seraphine, finding Lucien already in the main hall, surrounded by his advisors. He was fully in sovereign mode, his expression carved from stone. "How many?" he demanded. 20, armed with silver weapons and wooden stakes, Dashiell reported. "They say they have evidence, videos, photographs. They claim they will release it to the media if we do not negotiate. Let me speak to them," Lyra said. Every vampire in the room turned to stare at her. Lucien's eyes narrowed. "Absolutely not. I'm human. They're human. Let me go out there and talk to them, find out what they want." She moved to his side. "You can't negotiate with them directly. It will only confirm what they think they know. But I can. They are armed and hostile. I will not risk you. I'm already at risk. We all are. If they expose you, if this gets out." She took his hand. "Let me try. Please." She saw the war play out on his face. The king who needed to protect his people warring with the man who needed to protect her. Finally he nodded. "You will wear a wire. The moment I sense danger, I am coming for you. And you will not be alone. Seraphine will accompany you." Lyra agreed, and within minutes, she was walking toward the estate gates with Seraphine at her side. Through the iron bars, she could see a group of men and women, all carrying weapons that gleamed silver in the moonlight. They looked frightened and angry, a dangerous combination. "I'm Lyra Everett," she called out. "I'm human. I live here. What do you want?" A man stepped forward, older with graying hair and hard eyes. "You're human? Then you're either a prisoner or a collaborator, neither. I'm a guest." "They've brainwashed you." This from a younger woman holding a crossbow. "We know what they are. Monsters, killers. They've been hiding in plain sight for centuries." "They're not monsters," Lyra said calmly. "They're people, just different from us. They have laws, society, rules. They live peacefully alongside humans." "Peacefully?" The older man laughed bitterly. "They're predators. They feed on us. From willing donors and regulated blood banks. No one is killed. No one is harmed without consent." Lyra moved closer to the gate. "I know this is frightening. I was scared too when I first learned the truth. But fear doesn't have to lead to violence. We want guarantees," the man said. "We want assurances that they won't hurt anyone. We want oversight. Those things can be discussed, but not like this. Not with weapons and threats." Lyra glanced at Seraphine, who nodded subtly. "If you agree to put down your weapons, the sovereign will meet with you. He'll answer your questions. Show you the truth of how vampires live. How do we know this isn't a trick? Because I'm standing here, human and unharmed, asking you to choose dialogue over violence." Lyra held the man's gaze. "Please, give him a chance to show you that coexistence is possible." For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the older man lowered his silver-tipped stake. "One meeting. But if this is a trap, if anything happens to us, the evidence goes public immediately. Understood." The gates opened, and Lucien's guards disarmed the humans carefully but respectfully. Then Lyra led them into the estate, into the same formal ballroom where she'd first danced with Lucien. He was waiting there, looking every inch the king. But when he saw that Lyra was safe, relief flashed across his features. "Thank you for coming," he said to the humans. "I am Lucien Dravon, sovereign of the Eastern Vampire Court, and I would like to discuss how we might ease your fears." What followed was hours of difficult conversation. The humans had discovered vampire existence through a series of accidents, seeing things that shouldn't be possible. They'd spent months gathering evidence, preparing to expose what they saw as a threat. But Lucien met every concern with patience and honesty. He showed them the blood bank facilities, the careful regulations. He explained the laws that governed vampire behavior. He introduced them to vampires who worked in human society, doctors and teachers and artists. He demonstrated that exposure would cause more harm than good, potentially leading to a war neither side could win. Lyra watched him navigate the conversation with skill, but she also stepped in when needed. She provided the human perspective, validated their fears while challenging their assumptions. She became the bridge between two worlds, exactly as the prophecy had suggested. By dawn, the humans agreed to keep the secret. In exchange, Lucien established a liaison system, regular check-ins to ensure the vampire community continued to follow their laws. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, a framework for true coexistence. As the sun began to rise and the vampires retreated to light-tight chambers, Lucien pulled Lyra aside. He looked exhausted, more drained than she'd ever seen him. "You were extraordinary," he said. "You may have just saved both our peoples from a war. We did it together." She touched his face gently. "But you need rest. The sun is coming up. Stay with me?" His voice was vulnerable. "I want to wake with you beside me." Lyra had never been in his personal chambers during his daylight rest. She'd understood it was a position of deep trust, being with a vampire during their most vulnerable time. Now she followed him to a room deep in the estate's core, where no light could penetrate. The chamber was beautiful, all dark wood and soft fabrics. The bed was enormous, and when Lucien lay down, he looked almost human, mortal. Lyra curled up beside him, and his arms came around her automatically. "I love you," he murmured as sleep began to claim him. "My Lyra, my queen in all but name." "I love you too," she whispered back. My Lucien. She felt the moment he slipped into the death-like sleep of vampires, his body going completely still. It should have been eerie, but instead she felt honored, trusted. She fell asleep in his arms and dreamed of a future where two worlds became one. When she woke, it was late afternoon, and Lucien was awake, watching her with those red eyes soft with affection. "Hi," she said sleepily. "Hello, my love." He kissed her forehead. "Did you sleep well? Better than I have in years." She stretched, then registered the look on his face. "What's wrong?" "Nothing is wrong, but there is something I wish to discuss with you." He sat up, pulling her with him. "Last night, you proved beyond any doubt that you are the woman from the prophecy. You bridged our two worlds. You helped forge peace where there could have been war. My people are calling you their queen already, and rightfully so. So, Lucien, let me finish." He took both her hands. "I know we have only known each other for weeks. I know this is fast by mortal standards, but I have waited 800 years for you, and I do not wish to wait any longer." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. Lyra's breath stopped. The ring was stunning, a blood-red ruby surrounded by diamonds that glittered in the low light. It looked ancient and precious, the kind of thing that belonged in a museum. "This was my mother's ring," Lucien said quietly. "The only thing I have left from my mortal life. I have carried it for centuries, waiting for someone worthy to wear it." His eyes met hers. "Lyra Everett, I am asking you to be my queen. Not because of prophecy or duty or politics, but because I love you with everything I am, because I want to spend my immortality showing you how precious you are to me, because you have given my existence meaning again." Tears streamed down Lyra's face. "Yes," she said. "Yes. Of course, yes." The joy that broke across his face was like sunrise. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Then he was kissing her, deep and passionate and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lyra made a decision. "I want to be turned," she said. Lucien went still. "Lyra, you do not have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. Not because of prophecy or because you asked, but because I want forever with you." She held his gaze. "I want to stand beside you not just as your queen, but as your equal. I want centuries to love you. I want to see the future we'll build together. You understand what you would be giving up? Mortality, sunlight, the ability to have children, everything that makes human life. I understand that I would be choosing you. Choosing this life, this world, this love." She cupped his face. "I'm certain, Lucien, more certain than I've ever been about anything." He searched her eyes for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "Then I will gift you with eternity, but not today. Give yourself one more month to be absolutely sure. And if at the end you still wish this, I will turn you myself. 1 month," she agreed. "And then I become your queen in all ways." He kissed her again, and this time when passion rose between them, neither held back. They made love as the sun set, as the vampire world woke around them, and when Lyra cried out his name, when he whispered hers like a benediction, she knew she'd found exactly where she belonged. The month that followed was a whirlwind. Word spread through the vampire world that the sovereign had found his queen, that the prophecy was fulfilled. Vampires came from around the globe to pay their respects. Lyra met ancient creatures who'd lived through the rise and fall of civilizations. She learned more about vampire culture, about the responsibilities she would hold as queen. She also settled her affairs in the human world. She resigned from her job, though her boss was thrilled when she heard Lyra was marrying into the Dravon family. She moved out of her apartment, bringing her few precious possessions to the estate. She told her family she was moving abroad for love, which was true enough. The hardest part was knowing she would eventually have to fade from their lives entirely. After her transformation, she would need decades before she could control herself enough to be around humans safely. By the time she could see her family again, they would be old or gone. It was a grief she hadn't fully anticipated, and Lucien held her through many tearful nights. "You can still change your mind," he always said. I will love you regardless. But Lyra never wavered. She wanted this life, wanted him, wanted the chance to make a difference in a world that desperately needed bridges between species. On the night of the full moon, exactly 1 month after his proposal, Lucien came to her chambers in formal attire. "It is time," he said. "If you are ready, I'm ready." He led her deep into the estate, to a chamber she hadn't seen before. It was circular, with symbols carved into the stone walls. Candles burned in sconces, casting dancing shadows. In the center was a raised stone platform. "This is where all vampire royalty are turned," Lucien explained. "Where mortality ends and eternity begins." He helped her onto the platform, then joined her. "The process will be painful. The venom must spread through your entire system, rewriting every cell. It will feel like burning from the inside. But I will be here. I will not leave you. I trust you." And she did, absolutely. He gathered her close, tilting her head to expose her throat. "I love you, Lyra Everett. In this life and all that follow. I love you. Lucien Dravon, forever." His fangs pierced her skin and the world exploded into sensation. Pleasure first, overwhelming and electric, then heat spreading from the bite through her veins, then pain-burning agony that made her scream. She felt Lucien's venom working through her system, changing her, remaking her. True to his word, he never left. He held her through the transformation, whispering words of love and encouragement. He was there when her heart finally stopped beating, when the last of her humanity burned away. He was there when she opened new eyes to an enhanced world. Lyra gasped, seeing truly for the first time. Colors were more vivid, details sharper. She could hear conversations happening rooms away, could smell the individual scents of every vampire in the estate, and when she looked down at her hands, she saw they had become pale as marble, beautiful and terrible. "How do you feel?" Lucien asked. Lyra turned to him, seeing him with new eyes. He was magnificent, every detail of his face perfect. She could see the love blazing in his red eyes, could hear his unnecessary heartbeat that he maintained just to comfort her. "Powerful," she said, and her voice had changed, gaining an otherworldly resonance. "Clear, like I've been half asleep my whole life and just woke up. The hunger will come soon," he warned. "We should," but Lyra silenced him with a kiss. Now that they were both vampires, both immortal, the passion between them had no constraints. They made love on the stone platform, claiming each other completely. When they finally emerged from the chamber, dawn was approaching. The coronation happened a week later, giving Lyra time to adjust to her new existence. It was held in the great hall beneath the estate, with vampires from around the world in attendance. Lyra wore a gown of deep crimson, and Lucien placed a crown of white gold and rubies on her head. "I present to you Queen Lyra," he announced to the assembled crowd. "My mate, my equal, my heart. She will rule beside me, bridging the gap between our world and the human one. She is the fulfillment of prophecy and the beginning of a new age." The vampires roared their approval, and Lyra felt the weight of their expectations settle on her shoulders. But she also felt Lucien's hand in hers, steady and sure. Together, they would navigate whatever came next. The years that followed proved the prophecy true in ways no one had anticipated. With Lyra's help, Lucien began reaching out to human governments, slowly revealing the truth about vampire existence in controlled ways. They established formal treaties, systems of cooperation. Lyra became the face of vampire-human relations, trusted by both sides. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, conflicts, moments when war seemed inevitable. But Lyra and Lucien faced each challenge together, their bond growing stronger with each passing year. They were partners in all things, ruling their people with wisdom and compassion. On the night of their 50th wedding anniversary, they stood on the terrace of the estate, looking out at the world they'd helped reshape. Vampires and humans lived openly now, not without tension, but with understanding. The long shadow had lifted. "Do you ever regret it?" Lucien asked, his arm around her waist. "Giving up your mortality?" Lyra leaned into him, marveling, as she always did, that even after 50 years, her love for him hadn't diminished. If anything, it had grown, deepening with time and shared experience, not for a single moment. "This life, with you, is everything I never knew I wanted. I am the luckiest being in existence," he murmured, kissing her temple. "To have found you, to have been given forever with you. We're both lucky." She turned in his arms to face him. "That day I walked through your gates, I thought I was just delivering catering supplies. I had no idea I was walking into my destiny. I was waiting 800 years, he said, and you were worth every moment of the wait." They kissed as the moon rose over the estate, two immortals who had found what so few ever did, true, lasting love. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but what they'd created together went beyond any ancient prediction. They'd built a bridge between worlds, a testament to what was possible when courage and love worked together. And as they stood there in the moonlight, king and queen of a new age, they knew their story was just beginning. Forever stretched out before them, full of infinite possibilities, and they would face every one of them together. The woman who'd been mistaken for a queen had become one in truth. But more importantly, she'd found her home, her purpose, and a love that would endure through eternity. Sometimes the greatest destinies began with the simplest moments, a delivery, a misunderstanding, and a vampire king who'd said, "Let them stay." And in staying, Lyra Everett had found everything.